On the night of September 17, 1851, in Yazoo County, Mississippi, a field hand named Elijah poisoned 9 members of the Whitmore family during a wedding feast. By dawn, the most powerful plantation in the Mississippi Delta had become a graveyard. By week's end, the entire South knew the story of the forbidden love that destroyed an empire of cotton. This wasn't just murder. This was what happens when you try to cage the human heart. But to understand how one man brought down the Whitmores, we must go back 2 years earlier to a spring afternoon in 1849, when a girl returning from Charleston met a slave in her father's rose garden. And everything changed. The Whitmore plantation sprawled across 4,500 acres of the richest soil in the Mississippi Delta. In the spring of 1849, it was one of the largest cotton producers in the state, with 180 enslaved people working fields that stretched to the horizon like a sea of white gold. The big house stood on a gentle rise, a Greek revival mansion with 6 massive columns that could be seen for miles, a monument to wealth built on the backs of human beings who would never set foot inside its halls except to serve. Master Edmund Whitmore owned all of it, every acre, every bale of cotton, every man, woman, and child whose names appeared in his leather-bound property ledger. He was 50 years old that spring, a tall man with iron-gray hair and cold blue eyes that never showed mercy. His father had founded the plantation in 1802, and Edmund had expanded it into one of the most profitable operations in the Deep South. He didn't just own slaves, he believed in slavery with religious fervor, convinced that God himself had ordained the system, that Negroes were property no different than horses or cattle. His wife, Caroline, was the perfect plantation mistress. 46 years old, thin as a rail, with a face that looked like it had never smiled. She ran the household with military precision, managed the house slaves with cruelty disguised as discipline, and cared about exactly 3 things: her reputation, her social standing, and ensuring that everyone in Yazoo County knew the Whitmores were superior. They had 1 child, Catherine, 19 years old in 1849, just returned from 4 years at a finishing school in Charleston. She was beautiful in that delicate way that Southern society demanded: pale skin, dark hair, small waist. But there was something different about her now, something her parents hadn't anticipated. Charleston had changed her. She'd been exposed to ideas. Abolitionists walked freely in parts of that city. She'd heard them speak, had secretly attended a lecture by a Quaker woman who called slavery a sin against God. Catherine had returned to Mississippi, questioning everything she'd been raised to believe. That's when she met Elijah. He was 26 years old, born on the Whitmore plantation to a woman named Sarah, who died when he was 12. He worked the fields during cotton season, but Master Whitmore, recognizing his intelligence, had assigned him to maintain the ornamental gardens around the big house. It was an unusual field. Hands rarely got such positions, but Elijah had a gift with growing things. What Master Whitmore didn't know was that Elijah could read. The previous Mistress Whitmore, Edmund's first wife, who died in 1835, had been a secret abolitionist from Boston. Before her death, she'd taught 6-year-old Elijah his letters, had given him books hidden in the slave quarters, had told him something he never forgot. "You're not property, child. You're a human soul, and don't you ever forget it." Elijah had spent 20 years reading everything he could find. Books stolen from the big house library, newspapers left behind by visitors. He'd read Shakespeare, Milton, Jefferson's words about equality while living as Jefferson's contradiction. He'd memorized Psalm 23 and wondered what valley of death could be darker than slavery. He had deep brown eyes that saw everything, strong hands scarred from cotton bolls and whip marks, and a mind that knew he was living in hell. The first time Catherine Whitmore saw Elijah, it was a Thursday afternoon in April 1849. She'd been home for 3 days, already suffocating under her mother's rules and her father's expectations. She'd walked out to the rose garden seeking air, seeking space, seeking anything that wasn't the parlor where her mother interviewed potential suitors. Elijah was kneeling among the roses, pruning with careful precision. He didn't hear her approach. "Those are Papa's favorites," Catherine said, startling him. Elijah stood immediately, eyes down, hat in hands, the automatic gesture of survival. "Yes, miss. The bourbon roses. I tend them every week. You know their names?" Catherine asked, genuinely surprised. "I know all the flowers in this garden, miss," still not looking at her. Dangerous to look at a white woman, but Catherine had spent 4 years in Charleston learning to question everything. "Look at me when I speak to you." Elijah hesitated, then raised his eyes, met hers. Later, Catherine would say it was like looking into a mirror and seeing a soul as trapped as her own. "What's your name?" she asked. "Elijah, miss. Just Elijah."
"Slaves don't get family names, miss."
"We're property." The bitterness carefully controlled, Catherine flinched. She'd heard that word 1,000 times, but somehow coming from his mouth while his eyes held hers, it sounded different. Obscene. She didn't know what to say. "The roses are beautiful. You do good work. Thank you, miss." He started to turn away. "Wait." Catherine pulled a book from her pocket, Wordsworth's poems, something to read in the garden. Can you read?" The question hung between them, dangerous as nitroglycerin. Elijah calculated in an instant. Admit it and risk punishment. Deny it and miss something. He couldn't name what, but something in her eyes made him take the risk. "Yes, miss." "I can read." Catherine's eyes widened. "How?" "The old mistress, before she passed. She taught me. My father's first wife." "Yes, miss." A long silence. Catherine looked at the book in her hands, then at Elijah, then back at the book. "Have you read Wordsworth?" "Some years ago." "Which poem?" "Lines written a few miles above Tintern Abbey." Catherine almost dropped the book. That was her favorite. She'd read it 100 times. What's your favorite line?" Elijah's eyes met hers again. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a man who'd memorized these words like a prayer. "And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused." Catherine felt something crack open in her chest. "You understand it," she whispered. "I understand longing for something more, miss. I understand it very well." They stood there in the April sunlight, among the roses, on a plantation where she owned him like a chair or a table. And for the first time in Catherine Whitmore's life, she saw a slave as a complete human being, not a servant, not property, a man with a mind, a soul, a capacity for beauty that matched her own. It was the most dangerous moment of both their lives. "I come here most afternoons," Catherine said quietly, "to read." "I work here most afternoons, miss." Tending the flowers, their eyes held. Understanding passed between them, unspoken. This conversation had been treasonous. This moment had been revolutionary. And somehow, both knew it wouldn't be the last. Catherine returned to the big house, her heart hammering. Elijah went back to the roses, his hands shaking. Neither understood yet what they'd just started, but in the slave quarters that night, an old woman named Abigail, a midwife who'd been born in Africa and remembered the old ways, watched Elijah's face at evening prayer. She'd seen that look before. That dazed, dangerous look of a man who'd just glimpsed freedom in the least likely place. She said nothing, but she knew. Storm clouds were gathering over the Whitmore plantation, while Catherine and Elijah's hearts were discovering dangerous territory. The machinery of the Whitmore plantation ground on with brutal efficiency. Master Edmund Whitmore ruled his empire with calculated cruelty. He'd whipped 47 slaves in the past year alone, had sold off 12 children when they reached age 10, and had personally branded his initials into the shoulder of 3 runaways, recovered by slave catchers. He kept meticulous records in his office. Every bale of cotton, every dollar spent, every slave catalogued by age, strength, and breeding potential. The overseer, a man named Jacob Daniels, was worse than Edmund in some ways. 35 years old, born poor white trash in Alabama, he'd clawed his way to his position through viciousness. He carried a bullwhip coiled on his belt at all times, and he used it with the enthusiasm of a man who enjoyed inflicting pain. The slaves called him the devil behind his back. To his face, they called him boss and kept their eyes down. Daniels had a quota. Each slave in the cotton fields had to pick 200 pounds a day during harvest season. Anyone who failed got 10 lashes. No exceptions. He'd whipped pregnant women, old men, children. He'd once whipped a 14-year-old girl named Ruth so severely that she couldn't walk for a week, all because she'd picked 195 pounds instead of 200. The slave quarters, a row of crude wooden cabins, 400 yards from the big house, housed 180 people in conditions barely fit for animals, 10 to 12 people per cabin. Dirt floors, no windows. In summer, the heat was unbearable. In winter, they froze. They woke at 4:30 a.m. when Daniels rang the bell. They worked until sundown. They ate cornmeal, fatback, and whatever vegetables they could grow in tiny plots behind the cabins. On Sundays, they rested, and in those few hours, they tried to remember they were human. Elijah lived in cabin 7 with 11 others. He slept on a pallet of straw. He owned 3 things: the clothes on his back, a tin cup, and a small Bible hidden under a floorboard, the one the old Mistress Whitmore had given him before she died. This was his entire world. 39 acres of hell disguised as a garden. And then Catherine Whitmore walked into the rose garden, and suddenly, impossibly, he could imagine something else. The meetings in the rose garden became routine. Catherine would arrive in the afternoon with a book. Elijah would be working among the flowers. They would talk, at first carefully, just about literature, about the beauty of the garden, safe topics that wouldn't get either killed, but gradually, as spring turned to summer in 1849, the conversations deepened. "Why do you stay?" Catherine asked one afternoon in June. They were sitting on opposite sides of the garden path, never too close, always proper distance, but her question was anything but proper. Elijah looked at her carefully. "Where would I go, miss?" "North. There are free states. People who would help. The fugitive slave laws, miss. Even in free states, slave catchers can take you back. And if they catch you," he didn't finish. They both knew. Returned runaways were made examples of. Public whippings that left men crippled. Brandings, worse. "But some make it," Catherine pressed. "I've heard of the Underground Railroad." Elijah's head snapped up. "Where did you hear that term?" "In Charleston. There were rumors. Secret routes north, safe houses. You shouldn't speak of such things, miss. Even whispering about it is dangerous. Is it real?" A long silence. Then Elijah nodded slowly. "Yes, it's real. Have you thought about it?" "Every day of my life, miss." His voice raw with sudden honesty. "Every single day I think about running, about being free, about walking down a street without looking over my shoulder, about owning my own labor, my own time, my own soul." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry." "For what, miss?" "For this." "For all of it. For what my father is. For what my family does. You didn't make this system, miss. No, but I benefit from it. This dress, this house, my education, it's all built on." She gestured toward the fields where tiny figures bent over cotton rows in the brutal sun. "On their backs, yes, miss." "It is." They sat in silence, the truth hanging between them like a guillotine blade. "My name is Catherine," she said finally. "When we're alone, just Catherine, please." Elijah looked at her, saw the pleading in her eyes, saw something else too. Something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. "I can't call you that, miss. If anyone heard, there's no one here but the roses. Catherine." The name felt like sacrilege and salvation in his mouth. "Catherine." She smiled, and Elijah felt the ground shift beneath him. He was falling in love with a white woman, with his master's daughter, with the one person in the world he could never, ever have. And God help him, he could see in her eyes that she was falling too. The summer of 1849 burned into autumn, and their meetings continued. They'd progressed from literature to philosophy, from philosophy to personal stories. Catherine told him about Charleston, about the things she'd learned, about how returning to Mississippi felt like stepping backward in time. Elijah told her about his mother, about learning to read, about the secret life of the quarters where slaves would gather after dark and sing spirituals that were actually coded messages about escape and resistance. "Teach me," Catherine said one October afternoon. "Teach me the spirituals." "Why, Miss Catherine?" "Because I want to understand. Really understand." So Elijah taught her wade in the water, explained how it wasn't just about baptism, it was instructions for runaways to walk in streams, to throw off the bloodhounds. He taught her swing low, sweet chariot, how chariot meant the Underground Railroad, how home meant freedom in the north. He taught her steal away, the signal song that meant a secret meeting was happening that night. Catherine listened, horrified and fascinated. "Your people have been speaking in code this entire time, right under our noses. We had to, Catherine. It's how we survived." She reached out, not thinking, just reacting, and touched his hand. They both froze. They'd never touched before, never crossed that invisible line. But now Catherine's pale fingers rested on Elijah's darker skin, and the contact was electric. "I shouldn't," Catherine whispered. "No," Elijah agreed. But he didn't pull away. Their eyes met. And in that moment, everything changed. "Elijah," Catherine breathed. "Don't say it," he interrupted. "Please, Catherine, don't say it. Because if you do, I won't be able to walk away. What if I don't want you to walk away? Then we're both damned." "I think I already am." She moved closer, propriety forgotten. "I think about you constantly, every hour of every day. When I'm sitting in the parlor, pretending to care about which bachelor has the biggest plantation, all I can think about is when I'll see you again. When I'll get to talk to someone who actually thinks, who reads, who sees the world as more than property and profit. Catherine, I'm falling in love with you." The words burst out of her like a confession, like a prayer. "God forgive me, I'm falling in love with you." Elijah closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "I've loved you since the day you asked me about Wordsworth. I've loved you since you looked at me like I was a person instead of a thing. I've loved you knowing it would destroy us both." "Then we're already destroyed," Catherine said. "So what's left to lose?" She leaned in. He should have stopped her, should have pulled away, preserved them both. But 18 months of longing overwhelmed a lifetime of caution. They kissed among the roses, in the shadow of the big house, in the heart of a plantation where such love was legally impossible, morally forbidden and punishable by death. And for 30 seconds, they were free. The affair, if such an inadequate word could describe what they had, continued in absolute secrecy. Through the winter of 1849 and into the spring of 1850, they met in the rose garden when they could, sometimes in the old slave cemetery at night, where no one went after dark for fear of ghosts. Once daringly in the library, when the family was away at a neighbor's plantation. They never consummated their love. Both knew that crossing that final line would make the inevitable end even more catastrophic. But they held each other, kissed, whispered promises that both knew were fantasies. Catherine began changing. She started questioning her father's decisions openly at dinner. When Edmund Whitmore ordered a whipping for a slave named Thomas who'd broken a plough blade, Catherine said, "Perhaps if we gave them better tools, they wouldn't break so easily." The table fell silent. Edmund stared at his daughter. "What did you say?" "I said the tools are old, rusted. It's not Thomas's fault. A slave broke plantation property through carelessness. He'll be punished. That's the end of it. It's not fair." "Fair?" Edmund's voice rose. "Since when does fairness enter into the management of livestock?" "They're not livestock, Father. They're people." The slap came so fast Catherine didn't see it coming. Her head snapped to the side, her cheek blooming red. "Go to your room," Edmund said, voice ice. "And do not speak of such things in this house again." Catherine fled, tears streaming. But that night, she snuck out to meet Elijah in the cemetery. She told him everything. "You shouldn't have defended me," Elijah said, touching her bruised cheek gently. "Someone has to. He'll be watching you now, suspecting something. Let him watch." Catherine's eyes blazed with sudden defiance. "I'm tired of pretending. Tired of smiling while he beats people. Tired of acting like this is normal. Catherine, you need to be careful. I'm tired of being careful. She grabbed his hands. Let's run, together, north. There are people who would help us. We could be free. Elijah's heart seized. You don't know what you're saying. I do. I've been thinking about it for months. There's an underground railroad station in Memphis. I've read about it. If we could get there, Catherine, listen to me. Elijah gripped her shoulders. If we run and they catch us, and they would catch us, you'd be disgraced but alive. I'd be tortured and killed. Burned alive, maybe. Made an example of for every slave in Mississippi. Is that what you want? I want to be with you. Then we need a real plan. Time, resources. We can't just run wild into the night. Catherine nodded slowly. You're right. We plan, we prepare. And when the moment is right, we go. When the moment is right, Elijah agreed. Knowing that moment would likely never come. Knowing they were spinning a beautiful fantasy to avoid the ugly truth. They held each other in the darkness among the graves. Two people in love in a place where love between them was the gravest sin imaginable. They should have been more careful. They should have known that secrets that combustible can't stay hidden forever. Jacob Daniels, the overseer, was a cruel man, but he wasn't stupid. He'd noticed Catherine Whitmore's sudden interest in the welfare of the slaves. He'd noticed how she seemed to be in the rose garden every afternoon. He'd noticed how Elijah was always there too. On a warm afternoon in August 1850, Daniels decided to investigate. He approached the garden quietly, staying in the shadows of the magnolia trees. What he saw made his blood run cold and his opportunity senses tingle. Elijah and Catherine were sitting on a stone bench, close, too close. Catherine was reading aloud from a book of poems. Elijah was listening, smiling. They looked for all the world like any courting couple. Then Catherine finished the poem and looked at Elijah. That's my favorite, she said softly. Mine too, Elijah replied. I wish... Catherine hesitated, then continued. I wish we could just be two people. No plantations, no slavery, no rules. Just us. In another world, perhaps, Elijah said. In this one, we're playing with fire. Then let's burn, Catherine whispered. She leaned in and kissed him. Soft, gentle, absolutely unmistakable. Daniels watched for another minute, then slipped away silently. He'd just found his ticket to becoming the richest overseer in Mississippi. Daniels waited until evening. He found Master Whitmore in his study, reviewing cotton yield reports. Master Whitmore, sir, I need to speak with you about a matter of delicacy. Edmund looked up, frowning. What is it, Daniels? It concerns your daughter, sir. Edmund's eyes narrowed. Speak. I saw her today in the rose garden. With the slave Elijah. Elijah maintains the garden. That's his job, yes, sir. But what I saw was not a slave doing his job. Daniels paused for effect. I saw them kissing, sir. The ledger book hit the floor. Edmund Whitmore's face went from pale to crimson in seconds. What did you say? I'm sorry to be the bearer of such news, sir, but I saw it with my own eyes. Your daughter was intimate with the Negro. Edmund stood so fast his chair toppled. You're certain? Absolutely certain, sir. And judging by their comfort with each other, I'd say it's been going on for some time. Edmund's hands clenched into fists. In his mind, everything suddenly made sense. Catherine's strange questions, her defense of the slaves, her reluctance to entertain suitors. She'd been corrupted, defiled, by a Negro field hand. Where is she now? In her room, sir, I believe. And Elijah? In the quarters, sir. Edmund walked to a cabinet, pulled out a key, unlocked it. Inside was a bullwhip. He'd only used it personally a few times. Usually, he let Daniels handle disciplinary matters. But this required his personal attention. Gather 6 men, Edmund ordered. Bring Elijah to the whipping post, now. Yes, sir. And Daniels. Not a word of this to anyone. The dishonor to my family? Of course, sir. My lips are sealed. Daniels left practically salivating. He'd get a bonus for this. A big one. And the entertainment value would be significant. They dragged Elijah from the quarters 20 minutes later. 6 men, all armed, all grinning, with the anticipation of sanctioned violence. Elijah didn't struggle, he knew better. But he also knew what was coming. Someone had seen them. Someone had told. He was a dead man walking. They stripped him to the waist and tied him to the whipping post in the yard, the same post where dozens of slaves had been beaten over the years. The rope bit into Elijah's wrists. He faced the post, back exposed. Master Whitmore approached, bullwhip in hand. "You dare!" Edmund hissed. "You dare touch my daughter?" "Master Whitmore, please, silence!" Edmund's voice cracked like thunder. "You've defiled her, corrupted her, made her forget her place and yours. I never forced anything." "She, liar!" Edmund raised the whip. "She's innocent, pure. You bewitched her somehow. Used Negro voodoo, probably. Well, I'm going to beat it out of you. And then I'm going to sell you so far into the deep delta that you'll forget you ever saw her face." "Master." The first lash cut the word off. Elijah gasped, pain exploding across his back. The second fell before he could catch his breath, then the third. In her room, Catherine heard the first crack of the whip. She knew that sound, had heard it dozens of times. But this time, something in her soul screamed that it was different. She ran to the window, looked out toward the yard, and saw Elijah tied to the post. Saw her father raising the whip again. Catherine's scream shattered the evening air. "No, father, no." She ran for the door. It was locked. Her mother stood on the other side. "Mother, open this door." "You will stay in your room," Caroline said coldly. "And you will watch what happens to Negroes who forget their place. Mother, please. He didn't do anything wrong. He touched you. That's enough." Bang! Catherine threw herself against the door again. "Father, stop. Please!" Her voice carried to the yard. Edmund heard his daughter's anguish. Good. She needed to understand consequences. He brought the whip down again. And again. And again. By the 50th lash, Elijah's back was raw meat. Blood ran down his legs, pooled in the dust. By the 70th, he'd stopped making sounds, conscious but beyond screaming. By the 90th, the white bones of his ribs showed through torn flesh. Edmund delivered the 100th lash with all his strength, then stepped back, breathing hard. Elijah hung from the post like a broken doll, barely breathing. "Cut him down," Edmund ordered. "Take him to the quarters. Give him enough care to keep him alive. I won't lose my investment. But starting tomorrow, he works the farthest cotton field, the one by the swamp. No garden duty, no coming near the big house, and in 2 weeks, after my daughter's wedding to Colonel Thompson, I'm selling him to a cotton plantation in the Delta. He'll die in those fields, and he'll die knowing he never should have looked at what wasn't his." They cut Elijah down. He collapsed. 2 slaves carried him to the quarters. Catherine watched it all from her window, screaming until her voice gave out, then sobbing until she couldn't breathe. Her father had beaten the man she loved nearly to death, and she was powerless to stop it. If you're feeling rage right now, you should. This was the reality of slavery. Love itself was criminalized, beaten, destroyed. Hold that feeling. Remember it. Because what comes next is what happened when that rage finally had nowhere to go but into action. Elijah lay in his cabin for 3 days, drifting between consciousness and delirium. The woman who cared for him was Abigail, the elderly midwife who'd noticed that dangerous look in his eyes months ago. She cleaned his wounds with herbs from Africa that she'd cultivated in secret for decades. She gave him tea made from willow bark for pain. She whispered prayers in a language her mother had taught her, a language from across the ocean. And on the 3rd night, when Elijah finally surfaced from the fever, she looked into his eyes and saw what she'd expected. "You're going to kill them," she said simply. It wasn't a question. Elijah stared at the ceiling of the cabin. Every breath hurt. His back was on fire. But his mind was crystal clear. Yes. How many? All of them. Everyone in that house. Everyone who did this. And Miss Catherine. Elijah's eyes filled with tears. She tried to stop it. She was screaming. They locked her away. "They're forcing her to marry Colonel Thompson next month," Abigail said. "I heard the mistress telling the cook. The wedding is set for September 17th. Elijah closed his eyes. Catherine, his Catherine, forced to marry a 60-year-old widower, a man who owned 3 plantations and 400 slaves, a man whose previous wife had died under suspicious circumstances. After the wedding, Master Whitmore is selling you, Abigail continued, to a plantation in Bolivar County. The cotton fields there? Child, no one survives more than 5 years in those fields. I know. So you've got a month, maybe less. Elijah turned his head to look at her. Will you help me? Abigail was quiet for a long time. She was 63 years old, born in Africa, stolen at age 7, sold in Virginia, resold to Mississippi. She'd had 3 children, all sold away before they turned 10. She'd seen horrors that would break most people. She'd survived by being careful, by keeping her head down, by never causing trouble. But she was tired, so tired. And this young man, this brilliant man who dared to love across the color line, who'd been beaten nearly to death for the crime of being loved in return. He deserved his revenge. What do you need? She asked. Poison, Elijah said. Enough to kill 9 people, maybe more. Something that works fast, but not too fast. I want them to know what's happening. Abigail nodded slowly. I know the plants. Oleander grows around the big house. The master's wife loves how pretty it is. Foxglove in the ornamental garden. Water hemlock in the swamp. Mix them right, and you get something that will stop a heart in an hour, but make the hour feel like a year. Can you teach me? Child, I'll do better than that. I'll make it myself. You're in no condition to go gathering plants. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to end bloody. For you, for them, for all of us probably. They'll retaliate against every slave on this plantation when they find out. Then we help as many as we can escape, Elijah said. After the wedding, after the poison does its work, we open the gates, we give them supplies, and we run. All of us, Abigail smiled grimly. A rebellion and a massacre. Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner would be proud. I'm not trying to start a war. I just want justice for what they did to me, to Catherine, to all of us. Justice and revenge look mighty similar when you're standing in the smoke, child. Maybe that's because they're the same thing. Abigail stood, her old bones creaking. I'll start gathering the plants tomorrow. You rest, heal. You're going to need your strength for what's coming. She left him alone in the darkness. Elijah stared at the ceiling and thought about Catherine. Wondered if she was thinking of him. Wondered if she hated him for bringing this down on both of them. Wondered if there was any way, any chance, that they could survive this. Probably not, but he'd rather die trying to be free than live another day as a slave. And if he was going to die, he'd make damn sure Edmund Whitmore and everyone who'd laughed while he screamed died first. The next 4 weeks passed in a fog of pain and planning. Elijah healed slowly, his back a maze of scars that would never fully fade. He was assigned to the cotton fields as punishment, the worst work on the plantation, but he bore it silently. Every day he picked cotton. Every night he plotted murder. Abigail worked in secret. She collected oleander flowers, dried them in the shadows of her cabin. She harvested foxglove leaves at dusk when no one was watching. She waded into the swamp and dug up water hemlock roots, brought them back wrapped in cloth. She ground them together in a mortar, mixed them with alcohol to extract the alkaloids, evaporated the alcohol, and was left with a concentrated paste, odorless, tasteless, lethal. 1 teaspoon could kill a grown man. She made 6 tablespoons. This is enough for 20 people, she told Elijah on a night 2 weeks before the wedding. Maybe more. Depends on body weight, how much they eat and drink. How does it work? The oleander attacks the heart. The foxglove amplifies it. The hemlock shuts down the nervous system. Together, she mimed an explosion. Death is certain, but it's not fast. Takes 1 to 2 hours. Starts with nausea, dizziness, then convulsions. Then the heart fails. It's agonizing. Good, Elijah said coldly. Abigail studied his face. You're different now. Harder. They beat the softness out of me. And Miss Catherine? Elijah's expression cracked for just a moment. I'll try to save her, if I can. But he swallowed hard. She's marrying Thompson in 3 days. She has no choice. Her father will lock her in that house until she says, I do. Have you spoken to her since the beating? Once, she bribed a house slave to bring me a letter. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, worn from being read 100 times. She says she loves me, that she tried to stop it, that she'd run away with me if she could, but they watch her every second now. She says, his voice broke, she says goodbye, because she knows after the wedding I'll be sold and she'll never see me again. What did you write back? I told her to be patient, that I had a plan, that everything was going to change. You didn't tell her what you're planning. No, I won't make her complicit. Whatever happens, she needs to be able to say she had no knowledge. That way, maybe she'll survive the aftermath. You still love her. More than my own life. Tentar novamente continuar, Elijah whispered. Which is why I have to do this. I can't let her marry that monster. I can't let them win. Abigail handed him a small glass vial, dark brown, sealed with cork and wax. This is death in a bottle, child. Once you use it, there's no going back. Everyone who drinks or eats what this touches will die. You understand? I understand. And you'll need help. You can't be in the big house during the feast. Too obvious. I've thought of that. Solomon. Solomon was a house slave, 50 years old, the butler who served at the master's table. He'd been born on the Whitmore plantation, had served the family his entire life. But last year, Master Whitmore had sold Solomon's 15-year-old daughter to a plantation in Alabama. Sold her to a master known for breeding slaves, a man who would use her until she died in childbirth or disease. Solomon had served dinner the night after his daughter was taken. His face had been a mask, but Elijah had seen his eyes. There was murder in those eyes. Solomon will help us, Elijah said.
I'll talk to him tomorrow. Be careful who you trust.
One word to the wrong person and we're all hanging from trees. I know. Elijah tucked the vial inside his shirt, close to his heart. Thank you, Abigail, for everything. Don't thank me. Just make sure when you do this, you make it count. Make them remember. Make every slave owner in Mississippi wake up at night, wondering if their cook, their butler, their favorite house Negro is planning to poison them. I will. Abigail touched his face gently. And child, when it's done, run. Run north and don't look back. Take Miss Catherine if she'll go. Live free or die trying. That's all any of us can hope for. Elijah found Solomon 2 nights later in the quarters, after evening prayers. The old man was sitting outside his cabin, smoking a pipe, staring at nothing. Solomon! I need to talk to you. Solomon looked up, eyes tired. About what? About justice. And revenge. The old man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. I'm listening. Elijah sat beside him, spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. The wedding is in 2 days. September 17th. There's going to be a feast. Turkey, ham, all the finest food. Punch bowl full of rum. Wedding cake. I know. I'm serving it. What if you could do more than serve it? Solomon turned to look at him directly. Speak plainly, boy. I'm too old for riddles. What if you could poison the whole family? Master, mistress, the overseer, Colonel Thompson, all of them. What if you could watch them die, knowing your daughter was avenged? Solomon's pipe stopped halfway to his mouth. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about justice. Call it what it is, murder, mass murder. Yes, Elijah said. I am, and I'm asking if you'll help me. Solomon was quiet for a long time. Smoke curled up from his pipe into the night air. Somewhere in the distance, someone was singing a spiritual, swing low, sweet chariot. The song slaves sang when they wanted to go home, to freedom, to heaven, anywhere but here. They sold my baby girl, Solomon said finally. My Sarah. She was 15. She cried and begged Master Whitmore not to sell her. Got on her knees and pleaded. He laughed. Said he needed the money for a new carriage. A carriage? His voice cracked. He sold my child for a fucking carriage. I know. I've dreamed about killing him every night since. Every night I imagined putting my hands around his throat and squeezing until his eyes pop out of his skull. Then help me make it real. Solomon looked at him. You have poison? Elijah nodded. Enough to kill 20 people. Oleander, foxglove, water hemlock, mixed by Abigail. It'll kill them slow, painful. They'll know they're dying. Good. Solomon's eyes hardened. They should know. They should feel every second of it. I need you to put it in the food, the punch, the cake, anywhere you can. I'll be in the fields. They won't let me near the big house, but you'll be serving. You'll have access. They'll hang me, probably. They'll hang both of us, but we'll die free, Solomon. And they'll die first. Solomon knocked the tobacco from his pipe, stared at the glowing embers. When do I get the poison? Tomorrow night. I'll slip it to you after evening prayer. It's in a vial. Odorless, tasteless. Mix it in liquid, in gravy, wherever you can. The more they consume, the faster they die. And Miss Catherine, Elijah's jaw clenched. Don't let her eat anything. Tell her the food is too rich. Tell her she looks pale, anything. Keep her away from the poison. She'll know something's wrong. Let her know. Just keep her alive. Solomon nodded slowly. All right, I'm in. For my Sarah, and for every other child they've sold, every back they've whipped, every soul they've crushed. For all of them, Elijah agreed. They shook hands in the darkness, two men signing their own death warrants, but doing it with clear eyes and steady hands. September 17th, 1851 dawned hot and humid, typical Mississippi weather. The big house was a flurry of activity, servants decorating, cooks preparing the feast, the mistress barking orders. Catherine's wedding day had arrived. In her room, Catherine Whitmore sat in front of a mirror, while her mother and two aunts fussed over her hair. The wedding dress was beautiful, French lace, pearl buttons, a train that would stretch 6 feet behind her. It should have been the happiest day of her life. Instead, it felt like her execution. Smile, Catherine, her mother said sharply. You look like you're attending a funeral. I feel like I am, Catherine muttered. Her mother's hand cracked across her face. You will smile. You will say your vows. You will be grateful that after your disgusting indiscretion, a man of Colonel Thompson's stature is still willing to marry you. Catherine's cheek burned. She'd been slapped, locked in her room, denied food, subjected to lectures about purity and propriety for 4 weeks. But none of it hurt as much as knowing Elijah was out there somewhere, scarred and broken because he'd loved her. She'd tried to escape 3 times. Each time they'd caught her. Now they watched her constantly. I want to see him, Catherine said quietly. Just once more, please. Absolutely not, Caroline said. That animal is working the fields where he belongs. After today, you'll never see him again. Your father is selling him next week. He's not an animal. He's enough. Caroline grabbed Catherine's chin, forced her to look in the mirror. You are Catherine Whitmore. Your family founded this county. You will marry the colonel. You will bear his children. And you will never speak of that slave again. Do you understand? Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but underneath the tears, something else burned, rage, pure, incandescent rage. I understand, she said softly. Her mother smiled, satisfied. Good. Now let's get you dressed. Your husband is waiting. In the fields, Elijah worked under the brutal sun, picking cotton with mechanical precision. His back screamed with every movement, the scars still fresh, but he barely noticed. Today was the day. In a few hours, Catherine would marry Colonel Thompson. The feast would begin. The poison would do its work. And by sunset, the Whitmore family would be dead. Elijah had made peace with his own death. He knew there was no escape for him. Even if the poison worked perfectly, they'd know someone in the house had done it. They'd torture every slave until someone confessed, and Elijah wouldn't let others die for his revenge. He'd confess, take the blame, hang or burn, whichever they chose, but he'd die knowing Catherine was free of them, free to go north, to live her life, to maybe find happiness somewhere far from Mississippi. It was the best he could give her. Hey, you! Overseer Daniels rode up on his horse, whip coiled at his side. Pick faster! You're 20 pounds short of quota. Elijah looked up at him. This man had enjoyed beating him, had smiled while Elijah screamed. By tonight, Daniels would be dead too. He'd be at the feast, stuffing his face with turkey and cake. Yes, sir, Elijah said meekly. I'll work faster, Daniels sneered. You better. Or you'll meet the post again. He rode off, laughing. Elijah went back to picking cotton and smiled. 3 o'clock. The wedding ceremony began in the parlor of the big house. 40 guests, The elite of Yazoo County, plantation owners and their wives, old money and older prejudices. Catherine descended the grand staircase in her white dress, looking like a ghost. Her father waited at the bottom, offered his arm. She took it mechanically. "You're doing the right thing," Edmund whispered as they walked toward the makeshift altar. "Thompson will give you a good life, security, status, everything that Negro could never provide." Catherine said nothing. Colonel Josiah Thompson stood waiting. 60 years old, grossly overweight, his face red from decades of bourbon and rich food. His eyes crawled over Catherine's body with undisguised hunger. His first wife had been dead for 2 years. He needed a new broodmare, someone young who could give him heirs. Catherine Whitmore fit perfectly. Reverend McAllister opened his Bible. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in the sight of God." Catherine's mind drifted. She thought about Elijah, wondered where he was. If he was thinking of her, if he remembered their last kiss in the garden before everything fell apart. "Do you, Josiah Thompson, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Thompson's voice was eager. "And do you, Catherine Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Silence. Catherine stared at the Reverend, at Thompson, at her father's expectant face. Every instinct screamed to say no, to run, to find Elijah and escape together, consequences be damned. But guards stood at every door. Her mother's eyes bored into her back. There was no escape. Her voice cracked. "I do." Thompson slipped a ring onto her finger, gold, heavy. It felt like a shackle. "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss the bride." Thompson's wet lips pressed against hers, tongue pushing into her mouth. Catherine wanted to vomit, but she stood there and endured it while the guests applauded. She was Mrs. Josiah Thompson now, and she'd never felt more like a slave. 4:30. The reception feast began in the grand dining room. The table was spectacular, a monument to excess. Roasted turkey, honey-glazed ham, fried oysters, cornbread, collard greens, sweet potatoes, biscuits, gravy, pickled vegetables. And in the center, the wedding cake, 4 layers of vanilla cake with buttercream frosting, decorated with sugar flowers. Near the end of the table sat the punch bowl, massive crystal filled with rum punch. Floating orange slices and cherries. Solomon moved through the room like a ghost, serving plates, pouring drinks, invisible the way house slaves were always invisible. The vial was in his pocket. He divided it into 3 portions, 1 for the punch bowl, 1 for the gravy boat, 1 for the cake frosting. Master Whitmore sat at the head of the table, Mistress Caroline to his right. Colonel Thompson sat to his left, with Catherine beside her new husband looking like she'd rather be dead. Overseer Daniels sat near the foot, already half drunk. The extended family filled the rest of the seats. Uncle Robert, Aunt Virginia, cousins Margaret and James, various other relatives. 9 targets. All within reach, Solomon poured wine for the guests, circling the table. When he reached the punch bowl, his back was to the room for just 3 seconds. He pulled the first third of the vial from his pocket, uncorked it, poured it into the punch. Stirred with the ladle. The powder dissolved instantly, invisible, done. He continued serving. Reached the gravy boat sitting beside the turkey. Pretended to adjust its position. Poured the second third into the gravy. Stirred with a spoon, done. The cake was harder. It sat on a side table, waiting to be cut. The frosting was thick, perfect for hiding poison. But he couldn't just walk over and tamper with it in front of everyone. He'd have to wait for the right moment. Master Whitmore stood, raising his wine glass. "A toast to my daughter Catherine and her new husband Colonel Thompson. May their union be blessed with many sons." "Hear, hear!" the guests chorused, raising their glasses. "And may the Colonel forgive my daughter's recent foolishness," Edmund continued, shooting Catherine a look. "Young girls sometimes get romantic notions, but a firm hand and proper guidance will set her right." Thompson squeezed Catherine's thigh under the table, making her flinch. "Oh, I have no worries about that, sir. She'll learn her place soon enough." Laughter around the table. Catherine's face burned with humiliation. "Now then," Edmund said, "let's eat." Solomon served the punch. Solomon moved to the punch bowl, filled crystal cups, distributed them around the table. His hands were steady. No one suspected Master Whitmore drank deeply. Excellent. Solomon, you've outdone yourself. Thank you, sir. Mistress Caroline sipped hers. Lovely. Very refreshing. One by one they drank. Overseer Daniels drained his in 2 gulps, held out his cup for more. Uncle Robert and Aunt Virginia clinked their glasses together, laughing about something. Cousin Margaret, 16 years old, drank hers while making eyes at a young man across the table. Only Catherine didn't drink. She stared at her cup like it contained hemlock, which of course it did. Solomon leaned close to her, pretending to refill her water glass. "Don't drink anything, miss," he whispered. "And don't eat. Trust me." Catherine's eyes snapped to his face. She saw something there, a warning, a plea. She set down her cup. Solomon moved away before anyone noticed. The turkey was carved. Plates filled. Gravy poured over meat and potatoes. Everyone ate with the enthusiasm of people who didn't know they were consuming their last meal. Master Whitmore took a large bite of turkey drenched in gravy. Delicious. The cooks have outdone themselves. Colonel Thompson was eating like a starving hog, cramming turkey and ham into his mouth simultaneously. Wonderful. Simply wonderful. Overseer Daniels had seconds of everything, laughing loudly at his own crude jokes. Solomon watched, waited. The poison needed time to work, about an hour before symptoms would start. But first, he needed to contaminate the cake. Mistress Caroline stood. "Let's cut the cake." "Catherine, come dear." Catherine rose mechanically, joined her mother at the cake table. The guests gathered around for the traditional cutting. Catherine and Thompson held the knife together, cut through the bottom layer. Applause. "We'll serve this in a few minutes," Caroline said. "Let everyone finish their main course first." Perfect. Solomon approached the cake table with a serving knife and plates. He pretended to prepare for cutting and serving, his body blocking the view. His hand went to his pocket, pulled out the last third of the vial. He quickly spread the remaining poison across the exposed part of the cake, mixed it into the frosting with his finger, smoothed it so no one could tell. Done. All 3 delivery systems contaminated. Everyone at that table had consumed lethal amounts of poison. Now came the waiting. 5:15. Conversation flowed. Wine poured. Laughter echoed through the dining room. It was a perfect celebration of a southern aristocracy. Wealthy whites congratulating themselves on their superiority, while slaves served them food. No one noticed when Mistress Caroline put down her fork and touched her stomach. "Are you all right, dear?" Edmund asked. "I'm fine. Just a bit of indigestion, I think." "Perhaps you ate too quickly." "Perhaps." But Caroline's face had gone pale. Across the table, Aunt Virginia blinked several times. "Is anyone else's vision blurry?" "I can't quite focus. Too much punch, Ginny," Uncle Robert laughed. Then he burped. Tasted bile. "Oh, that's unpleasant. 5:30. The symptoms were spreading. Overseer Daniels stood abruptly. "Excuse me," he muttered, hurrying toward the door. He made it 3 steps before vomiting spectacularly onto the Persian rug. The room fell silent. "Daniels," Edmund snapped. "Control yourself!" But Daniels was on his hands and knees, retching violently, bringing up everything he'd just eaten. Blood flecked the vomit. "What's wrong with him?" someone asked. Then Mistress Caroline doubled over with a cry. "Something's wrong. Edmund, I feel..." She vomited into her napkin. Panic rippled through the room. "It's the food," someone said. "The food is bad." "Or the punch." Another voice called. Master Whitmore tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't hold him. He collapsed back into his chair, hand clutching his chest. Can't breathe right." Colonel Thompson's face had turned purple. Sweat poured down his jowls. He made a horrible gurgling sound, then vomited across the table, spattering the wedding cake. "Poison!" someone screamed. "We've been poisoned." Chaos erupted. Guests stumbling, falling, vomiting. Aunt Virginia collapsed, seizing on the floor. Uncle Robert tried to help her, but he was convulsing too, his body jerking violently. Cousin James, the 12-year-old boy, cried out for his mother as his small body went into convulsions. His mother was too busy dying herself to help him. Catherine stood frozen, watching the horror unfold around her. People she'd known her entire life were writhing on the floor, choking on their own vomit, seizing, dying, and she hadn't eaten anything. Her eyes found Solomon, standing in the corner, face carefully neutral. Understanding crashed over her like a wave. Elijah. Elijah had done this. Someone get the doctor. Edmund gasped, foam bubbling from his mouth. Now! 2 slaves ran for the door, but the nearest doctor was 8 miles away. Even if he rode at full gallop, he'd arrive far too late. 5:45, the first death. Mistress Caroline's body arched one final time, then went still. Her eyes stared at nothing, blood trailing from her mouth and nose. "Caroline!" Edmund crawled toward his wife, but his own body was failing. His heart was racing, skipping beats, squeezing like a fist in his chest. "No, no!" Overseer Daniels was seizing so violently he broke his own collarbone. The crack was audible across the room. He flopped like a fish, blood pouring from his bitten tongue, and then he too went still. 6 o'clock. The dining room was a slaughterhouse. Bodies littered the floor in puddles of vomit and blood and excrement. Some were still moving, still gasping, clinging to life by threads. Others had already crossed over. Uncle Robert lay dead, his face frozen in an expression of absolute agony. Aunt Virginia died choking on her own vomit, unable to turn her head. Cousin Margaret, 16 years old, died crying for her father, who'd already gone. Cousin James died in convulsions, his small body unable to withstand the assault of the poison. Colonel Thompson was still alive, but barely. He'd eaten more than anyone, glutton that he was, and the poison was destroying him from the inside. He looked at Catherine with hate-filled eyes. You knew." "I didn't," Catherine whispered. But even she wasn't sure that was true. Some part of her had known something was happening, had known and done nothing to stop it. Thompson tried to speak again, but only blood came out. He convulsed one final time, his massive body shaking the floor, and then he died. Catherine turned to her father. Edmund was still alive, the last one, lying on the floor near his dead wife. His face was grey, lips blue, eyes wide with terror and understanding. Catherine knelt beside him. He looked at her, tried to speak. You were part of this?" "No," Catherine said. "But I'm not sorry it happened. We gave you everything. You gave me nothing but a cage." Catherine's voice was cold. "You beat the man I loved nearly to death. You forced me to marry a monster. You sold human beings like cattle and called it God's will. We're your family. You stopped being my family the day you whipped Elijah." Edmund's hand reached for her. Trembling, pleading, Catherine stood up, stepped back, watched. Her father died without her touch, without comfort, without forgiveness. Master Edmund Whitmore, founder's son, plantation owner, slaveholder, died on the floor of his own dining room, surrounded by his dead family, killed by the people he'd enslaved. If you're feeling something powerful right now, shock, horror, satisfaction, confusion, that's appropriate. This was real. Mass poisonings by enslaved people happened throughout the South when desperation overtook fear. Hold that complexity. Remember that violence always comes from somewhere. And continue, because this story isn't finished. 6:30. The dining room was silent except for the buzz of flies already gathering. 9 bodies lay in various positions of death. Catherine stood among them, covered in other people's blood, trembling. Solomon appeared at her elbow. "Miss Catherine, we need to go now. They're all dead." "Yes, miss. And when people realize what happened, they'll come looking for whoever did this. We need to run." "We?" Catherine looked at him. "You helped Elijah." "I did, and I don't regret it. But we're both dead if we stay. You, me, Elijah, anyone they suspect. They'll hang every slave on this plantation if they have to." Catherine looked around the room one more time. Her mother's body, her father's, the people she'd grown up with, all dead. She should feel grief, horror. Instead, she felt nothing, just emptiness where love should have been, where family should have been. "Where's Elijah?" she asked. "In the quarters waiting. We have plans to run. I can take you to him." Catherine made her decision in an instant. These people had tried to chain her, force her into a life she didn't want, beat the man she loved, make her a slave in everything but name. They'd failed. "Take me to him," Catherine said. And gather anyone who wants to run. Tonight we're all getting free." Solomon nodded. "There's a dozen of us ready. Abigail, Elijah, myself, others who've been waiting for a sign. This is it." They left the dining room stepping over corpses, leaving behind the wreckage of the Whitmore Empire. 7 o'clock. The slave quarters were buzzing with tense energy. Word had spread. Something had happened at the big house, something catastrophic. Elijah stood outside cabin 7 waiting. He'd washed the field dirt from his hands and face, had changed into the cleanest clothes he owned. If he was going to die tonight, he'd die clean. Then he saw her. Catherine came running across the yard, still in her blood-spattered wedding dress, Solomon trailing behind. Her hair had fallen from its elegant pins. Her face was pale, but her eyes were alive in a way Elijah had never seen. Elijah! She crashed into him, arms wrapping around his scarred back. He gasped at the pain, but held her anyway. "Catherine. God, Catherine, I'm sorry. Don't apologize." She pulled back, looked at him. "Don't you dare apologize. They're dead. All of them. My father, my mother, that monster they forced me to marry. All dead, and I'm glad." Elijah searched her face. "You didn't eat anything?" "Solomon warned me. I knew something was happening. I should have stopped it, but She shook her head. "I didn't want to stop it." "Does that make me a monster?" "It makes you free," Elijah said softly. He touched her face, thumb brushing her cheek. "But we need to run. Right now. By morning, they'll discover the bodies. They'll send militias, posses, bloodhounds. They'll burn this plantation to the ground, looking for whoever did this. Then we go north, like we planned. The Underground Railroad. It's dangerous. If we're caught, they'll hang me, and probably you too now. They'll call you insane, say I bewitched you, but you'll still die. I don't care." Catherine gripped his shirt. "I'm not spending one more day in Mississippi. I'm not living one more second without you. We run together, or we die together." Elijah kissed her then, desperate and deep, tasting blood and freedom and terror on her lips. When they broke apart, both were crying. "Then we run," he said. 7:30. 16 people gathered in the shadows between the cabins. Elijah, Catherine, Solomon, Abigail, and 12 others. Field hands, house servants, the stable boy, the cook's assistant, the young and the old, the strong and the desperate, all united by one desire, freedom. Elijah addressed them in a whisper. "By now you all know what happened. The Whitmore family is dead, poisoned during the wedding feast. The white folks will blame all of us. They won't care who actually did it. They'll hang whoever they can catch as examples. So we run," someone said. "Yes, we head north. There's an underground railroad station in Memphis, about 150 miles from here. If we can reach it, they'll help us get to free states. But it's dangerous. Slave patrols, bloodhounds, bounty hunters. Some of us might not make it. Better to die trying than to wait here for the noose," Abigail said firmly. Murmurs of agreement. "We take supplies from the big house," Elijah continued. "Food, water, blankets, money from the safe. Solomon knows the combination. We take the horses from the stable. We travel by night, hide by day. We stick together as long as we can, but if we're pursued, we split up. Better some escape than none." "What about weapons?" the stable boy asked. He was 18, strong, angry. Master Whitmore kept rifles in his study. Solomon said, 6 of them. "We take those, ammunition too. If they come for us, we fight. We'll be hunted like animals," one of the older women said quietly. "We're already hunted like animals," Elijah replied. "But tonight we're hunters too. Tonight we take our lives back." Catherine stepped forward. She'd torn off the bottom of her wedding dress to make it easier to run, and she'd tied her hair back. In the moonlight she looked like a warrior. "I know most of you don't trust me," she said. "I'm Edmund Whitmore's daughter. I've lived in luxury while you suffered. But I'm choosing this. I'm choosing freedom with you. I'm choosing Elijah. And if you'll have me, I'll run with you and fight with you and die with you if it comes to that." The group was silent, studying her. Finally, Abigail spoke. "The girl speaks true. I've watched her. She's not like her parents. She's got a good heart under all that white skin." She looked around at the others. "Besides, we need her. White woman traveling with us. She can talk to people, get supplies, say we're her servants. She's useful. Slowly, nods of agreement. Then it's settled, Elijah said. We leave in 1 hour. Get whatever you need. Say goodbye to this place. We're never coming back. 8 o'clock. The group moved through the big house like ghosts gathering supplies. It was eerie, walking through rooms where corpses still lay. No one had come to check on the wedding party yet. The other slaves were too afraid, and no one else was expected until morning. Solomon opened the safe in Master Whitmore's study. Inside, $3,000 in cash, some jewelry, property deeds that were now worthless. They took the money, left the rest. Catherine went to her old room, changed out of the wedding dress into riding clothes, trousers, shirt, boots. Masculine clothing, practical. She caught sight of herself in the mirror, didn't recognize the woman staring back. Good. Catherine Whitmore was dead. Whoever she was now, she'd figure out along the way. In the kitchen, they packed food, dried meat, cornbread, preserved fruit, anything that would keep. Water skins filled from the well, blankets from the linen closet. From the study, they took the rifles, 2 revolvers, ammunition, and a detailed map of Mississippi that showed the roads north. 8:30. 16 people, 4 horses, supplies, and weapons. They gathered at the edge of the plantation, looking back at the big house one last time. Should we burn it? Someone asked. Destroy everything? Elijah considered. A fire would attract attention, bring people running. But leaving it intact felt wrong somehow. No, he decided. Let them find the bodies. Let them see what we did. Let every slave owner in the South see and understand. This is what happens when you push people too far. They turned their backs on the Whitmore plantation and walked into the darkness. Behind them, the big house stood silent, full of corpses and the dying dreams of the Southern aristocracy. Ahead lay 150 miles of dangerous territory, bloodhounds, slave catchers, and militia. But for the first time in their lives, they were walking toward freedom instead of away from it. And that made all the difference. September 18th, 1851. Dawn. A supply merchant named Henry Clarkson arrived at the Whitmore plantation for his weekly delivery. He knocked on the kitchen door. No answer. Strange, the cooks were always up by 6. He walked around to the front, knocked on the main door. Still nothing. Growing concerned, Clarkson tried the door. Unlocked. He stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Blood, vomit, death. He covered his nose, moved toward the dining room, where he heard flies buzzing. What he saw made him vomit instantly. Bodies everywhere, still sitting at the table, slumped on the floor, sprawled in puddles of fluids and filth. The most powerful family in Yazoo County, dead in their wedding finery. Clarkson ran, stumbled out of the house, fell down the steps, scrambled to his horse. He rode to town at full gallop, screaming before he even dismounted. Murder, massacre, the Whitmores are all dead. By noon, the Whitmore plantation was swarming with people. Sheriff Amos Johnson, the doctor, neighboring plantation owners, townsfolk drawn by morbid curiosity. They stood in the dining room, staring at the carnage. Poison, Dr. Russell confirmed after a brief examination. Multiple poisons, I'd say. Something extremely potent. They died in agony. The slaves, someone said. It had to be the slaves. Sheriff Johnson walked to the slave quarters, found them empty. All 16 cabins abandoned. Clothes left behind, belongings scattered. Everyone gone. They ran, he reported. Must have been last night, right after the poisoning. How many? Hard to say. Maybe a dozen. Maybe more. Colonel Beauregard, owner of the neighboring plantation, stepped forward. This is an uprising. This is what we've always feared. One successful poisoning, one successful escape, and it spreads. Every slave in Mississippi will think they can do the same. We need to make an example, Judge Pemberton said grimly. Catch them. Hang them publicly. Show every Negro in the South what happens to murderers. Sheriff Johnson nodded. I'll form a posse. We leave within the hour. They're on foot, can't have gotten far. Not all on foot, the stable master reported. 4 horses missing, and guns from the study. Armed fugitives, Beauregard said. Even more reason to shoot on sight. What about Miss Catherine? Someone asked. She was at the wedding. Is she among the dead? They searched. Catherine's body wasn't in the dining room, but her wedding dress was found in her room, abandoned. Her riding clothes were gone. She's either dead somewhere else or— Sheriff Johnson's face darkened. Or she's with them. Kidnapped, Judge Pemberton said quickly. Obviously kidnapped. Probably the ringleader, that field hand who was involved with her before. What was his name? Elijah, someone supplied. Elijah, yes. He poisoned the family, kidnapped Miss Catherine, and fled with accomplices. That's the story. Is it the story? Sheriff Johnson asked quietly. Or is it the truth? The men exchanged uncomfortable looks. The idea that Catherine Whitmore had willingly run off with the Negro was unthinkable. But also, the story, Beauregard said firmly. We tell people she was kidnapped, bewitched under duress. Otherwise, the scandal will destroy what's left of the Whitmore name, and it'll shake the foundations of every family in the county. If a plantation owner's daughter can fall in love with a slave, can choose them over her own people. He didn't finish. He didn't have to. The story, everyone agreed. Within an hour, wanted posters were being printed. $10,000 reward, wanted dead or alive. Dangerous fugitive slave mass murderer name. Elijah, no surname. Age, 26 years. Height, 6 feet. Distinguishing marks, extensive whip scars on back crime. Murder of 9 white citizens by poison. Conspiracy to commit insurrection. Kidnapping of Miss Catherine Whitmore, additional. $5,000 reward for Catherine Whitmore's safe return. She is believed to be under Negro bewitchment, armed and extremely dangerous. Approach with caution. 200 men assembled, plantation owners. Their sons, professional slave catchers, poor whites looking for reward money. They brought bloodhounds, rifles, rope for hanging. The largest manhunt in Mississippi history began September 19th, day 2 of the escape. Elijah's group had traveled 40 miles in 2 nights, sleeping hidden during the day in swamps, forests, anywhere off the main roads. They were exhausted, hungry, terrified, but alive. They'd split into smaller groups the second night. Better odds if pursued. Elijah, Catherine, Solomon, Abigail, and 3 others stayed together. The rest scattered, heading for different underground railroad stations. Now they were hiding in an abandoned tobacco barn, resting during daylight hours. Catherine slept fitfully against Elijah's shoulder. The others dozed or kept watch. Solomon approached Elijah, expression grim. We've got problems. What kind? I scouted the road while you were sleeping. Saw riders, maybe 20 of them. Bloodhounds, too. They're searching systematically, checking every farm, every building. How far? 5 miles, maybe less. They'll be here by nightfall. Elijah's jaw clenched. We need to move now, daylight or not. We move in daylight, someone will see us. Report us. We stay here, the dogs will find us. It was an impossible choice. Catherine stirred, woke. What's wrong? Posse closing in. She sat up, instantly alert. Then we run, now. It's too dangerous. Everything is dangerous. Catherine stood, brushed hay from her clothes. But I'd rather die running than die hiding. At least running. We have a chance. Elijah looked at her, this woman who'd given up everything to be with him, who'd watched her family die and felt nothing but relief, who was willing to die for a chance at freedom. He loved her more than his own life. We run, he decided. They gathered their supplies, checked their weapons. The group was exhausted, but determination carried them forward. They left the barn, moving through the tree line, avoiding the main road. The plan was to reach the Pearl River by nightfall. If they could cross it, they'd be in the next county, might shake the pursuit. They'd been walking for 2 hours when they heard it. Baying in the distance, bloodhounds. They've picked up our scent, Solomon said. How long do we have? 20 minutes, maybe less. The group looked at each other. They all knew what this meant. We split up, Abigail said. Some go north, some go east, some go west. Confuse the dogs, divide the pursuit. No, Catherine said. We stay together. Girl, if we stay together, they'll catch all of us. Then they catch all of us. But I'm not leaving Elijah. And I'm not letting any of you face them alone. Elijah wanted to argue, wanted to insist she save herself. But he knew that look. Catherine had made her choice. We stay together, he agreed. And we make them work for it. They ran. through the woods, over streams, pushing their exhausted bodies to the limit. Behind them, the baying grew louder, closer. They reached the Pearl River just as the sun was setting. The water was dark, moving fast. On the other side, more trees, more hiding places, possibly safety. "Can everyone swim?" Elijah asked. Nods, except for Abigail. "I never learned," the old woman said calmly. "Go on without me. I'll hold them off." "No," Elijah said. "We carry you across." Child, I'm 63 years old. I've lived my whole life as a slave. These past 2 days running free, that's enough. That's more than most of us ever get." Abigail pulled out a revolver, one of the ones they'd taken from the big house. "You go. I'll buy you time." "Abigail, go!" She turned toward the sound of approaching bloodhounds. "I'm done running. But you can make it. You can be free, for all of us who never got the chance." Tears streamed down Elijah's face, but he knew she was right. Arguing would waste the time she was giving them. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me, live. That's all the thanks I need." They plunged into the river. The current was strong, the water cold. Catherine gasped, struggling against the flow. Elijah grabbed her hand, pulled her along. Behind them, they heard shouting, gunfire, Abigail's last stand. They didn't look back. They swam. The posse reached the riverbank to find an old woman standing alone, revolver pointed at them. "That's far enough," Abigail said. Sheriff Johnson held up a hand, stopping his men. "You're Abigail, the midwife from Whitmore Plantation." "I am. Where are the others?" "Gone, and you won't catch them. We have bloodhounds. They can track across water. Maybe, but not before those people get far enough away that it doesn't matter." Abigail smiled. "I've delivered 200 babies in my life, every single one born into slavery. I couldn't give them freedom, but today I can give 7 people a chance. That's worth dying for. You don't have to die, old woman." "Tell us where they went. We'll show mercy," Abigail laughed. "You don't know what mercy is. You whip children. You rape women. You sell families apart. You're demons, every one of you." "Careful," Sheriff Johnson said. "You're already going to hang. Don't make it worse. Worse than 63 years of slavery. Not possible." She raised the revolver. "Shoot her," someone said. 20 rifles fired simultaneously. Abigail's body jerked with impacts, fell backward. Blood bloomed across her dress. She hit the ground hard, but she died smiling. She died free. On the other side of the river, Elijah's group heard the volley of gunfire. They knew what it meant, Catherine sobbed. Solomon closed his eyes. The others bowed their heads. "We keep moving," Elijah said quietly. "We honor her by surviving, by getting free." That's what she wanted. They moved deeper into the woods, leaving the river behind. Behind them, the posse was regrouping, preparing to cross. But Abigail had bought them time, precious time. September 25th, 8 days since the escape. The group had been reduced to 5. 2 had been captured near Vicksburg, hung on the spot. 1 had died from infected wounds. Now it was just Elijah, Catherine, Solomon, and 2 others, Ruth and Moses. They were close to Memphis. So close they could taste it. But the pursuit had been relentless. Wanted posters everywhere. Every white person a potential betrayer. They'd been sleeping in a cave for 3 days, too exhausted to continue. Food was running low. Catherine had developed a fever. Moses had an infected cut on his leg that wasn't healing. "We're not going to make it," Ruth said quietly. "Don't say that," Elijah replied. "Look at us. We're starving, wounded, hunted. Even if we reach Memphis, we need to find the right people, the right safe house. One wrong move and we're dead, so we don't make a wrong move. Elijah, I know you want to believe. I have to believe." Elijah's voice cracked. "Because if I don't, if I accept that we're all going to die, then what was it for? Abigail's sacrifice, the others who got caught, my own scars, Catherine's choice. If we give up, they win. The slave owners, the hunters, the system, they win. And I won't let them win." Silence in the cave. Finally, Solomon spoke. "Then we try. One more time, we get to Memphis. Find the station. And if we die trying, we die free." "Free," the others agreed. September 27th. Dawn. They approached Memphis carefully, moving through the outskirts. The city was larger than anything most of them had ever seen. Buildings, streets, people everywhere. How do we find the safe house? Catherine asked. Look for the signs, Solomon said. Abigail told me. A house with a lantern in the window. A quilt with a specific pattern hanging outside. Underground railroad stations mark themselves, but you have to know what to look for. They spent the day searching, asking careful questions, following rumors. Finally, as the sun was setting, Catherine spotted it, a small house on the edge of town, modest, unremarkable except for one detail, a lantern burning in the window. Even though it was still light out and hanging from the porch, a quilt in a pattern called North Star. That's it, Solomon breathed. They approached cautiously. Elijah knocked. The door opened. A middle-aged white woman stood there, plain dress, kind eyes. Behind her, a black man, free, judging by his clothes and bearing. We're travelers, Elijah said carefully. Looking for friends. The woman studied them, taking in their exhausted faces, torn clothes, desperate eyes. Friends of a friend? She asked. Yes, ma'am. Friends of a friend, she smiled. Come in, quickly, you're safe now. Inside, they collapsed. For the first time in 10 days, they were truly safe. The house was an underground railroad station, run by Quakers who believed slavery was a sin. Thou art safe here, the woman, Mrs. Sarah Henderson, said. We'll feed thee, tend thy wounds, and help thee continue north. They ate real food, warm bread, stew with actual meat. Catherine's fever broke with proper medicine. Moses's leg was treated. That night, lying on clean blankets for the first time since the escape, Catherine and Elijah finally had a moment alone. We made it, Catherine whispered. We actually made it. Not all the way yet. Still need to get to a free state. Canada, ideally, but we're alive together. Elijah pulled her close, careful of his scarred back. I thought I'd die on that plantation. I'd accepted it. And then you walked into the garden with a book of poems, and suddenly I wanted to live. I thought I'd suffocate in that house. Marry some rich man, have his children die never having really lived. And then you quoted Wordsworth, and suddenly I could breathe. They kissed soft and deep. Do you regret it? Elijah asked. Everything you gave up? I gave up nothing real, Catherine said. Money, status, security, those were illusions. This is real. You are real. Freedom is real. Your family, they stopped being my family when they stopped treating people like people. I don't mourn them, Elijah. Is that wrong? No, he said. It's honest. They were monsters who happened to share your blood. And now we go north, Canada, change our names, start new lives. I'll work, carpentry maybe, or teaching if they'll let a Negro teach. I'll do whatever I want, Catherine interrupted, smiling. That's the point of freedom, isn't it? I choose. For the first time in my life, I choose. They held each other in the darkness. Two people who'd destroyed one world to build another. But freedom came with a price. On October 3rd, 1851, 2 weeks after they reached Memphis, they were betrayed. A free black man looking for reward money told authorities about the fugitives hiding at the Henderson house. At midnight, 30 armed men surrounded the building. Sheriff Johnson, who'd been pursuing them since the beginning, knocked on the door with a rifle butt. We know you're in there. Come out now, and Miss Whitmore won't be harmed. Inside, Elijah, Catherine, Solomon, Ruth, and Moses looked at each other. Back door. Catherine asked. Blocked, Solomon said, peering through a window. They've got us surrounded. We fight, Moses said, checking the rifles they'd brought. We're outgunned 30-5, Ruth said. We'll die in minutes. Then we die, Elijah said. But we die free, Mrs. Henderson appeared, wringing her hands. Please don't fight in my home. I have children upstairs. We're sorry, Catherine said. You've been so kind. But we can't surrender. You understand? The Quaker woman's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. I understand. God be with thee. She gathered her family, moved them to the cellar. Elijah, Catherine, Solomon, Ruth, and Moses prepared for their last stand. If this is the end, Catherine said, I want you all to know I'm grateful for letting me run with you, for treating me as an equal, for showing me what freedom means. You're one of us now, Ruth said. White skin or not, They positioned themselves at windows, rifles loaded. Sheriff Johnson's voice called out again, "Last chance. Surrender or we burn you out." Elijah looked at Catherine. "I love you. In this life and whatever comes next, I love you too. More than I knew it was possible to love." They kissed one final time. Then Elijah shouted through the window, "We're not surrendering! Come and take us!" Silence. "Then so be it." Gunfire erupted. The siege lasted 20 minutes. Elijah's group fired back, managed to wound 3 of the posse. But there were too many attackers, too many guns. Moses was shot through the window. Killed instantly. Ruth took a bullet to the chest. Bled out in Catherine's arms. Solomon was hit in the leg, then the shoulder. Went down fighting. Elijah and Catherine held the center room, firing whenever they saw movement. But their ammunition was running low. "This is it," Elijah said. Catherine nodded. Together? Together. They had 1 bullet left between them. Elijah loaded it into his revolver. Looked at Catherine. She understood. "Do it," she said. "Don't let them take us alive." Elijah's hand shook as he raised the gun, pointed it at Catherine's heart. She closed her eyes, waiting, but he couldn't do it. "Couldn't pull that trigger, I'm sorry," he whispered. I can't kill you." Catherine opened her eyes, saw his tears. "Then we surrender, together." They dropped their weapons, walked to the door, opened it, stood in the doorway, hands raised. The posse rushed them, slammed them to the ground, chained them. Dragged them out to the yard where 3 bodies already lay. Moses, Ruth, Solomon, all dead. "You killed them." Catherine screamed. "They surrendered, and you killed them anyway." Sheriff Johnson ignored her. He looked at Elijah. "You murdered 9 people, poisoned them like a coward." "I killed 9 demons," Elijah said. "And I'd do it again." Johnson backhanded him, splitting his lip. "You're going to hang publicly, and before you die you'll watch us hang her too." "She's innocent. She didn't poison anyone. She ran with you. That's guilt enough." They were thrown into a wagon, chained separately. The posse rode back toward Mississippi with their prize catches, eager to claim the rewards. The trial was held in Yazoo City on October 10, 1851. It lasted 6 hours. Elijah was charged with 9 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit insurrection, kidnapping, and destruction of property. Catherine was charged with conspiracy, treason against her race, and unnatural relations with a Negro. The courtroom was packed. Hundreds came to see the notorious criminals. The Negro who'd poisoned a whole family. The white woman who'd betrayed her people. The prosecution presented evidence. The bodies, the poison residue, the escaped slaves, the stolen money and weapons. The defense. Court-appointed. Half-hearted, argued temporary insanity for Elijah. Clearly the whipping drove him mad. And coercion for Catherine. She was bewitched, perhaps drugged. Elijah refused to play along. When given a chance to speak, he stood. "I'm guilty," he said, "of everything they've accused me of except kidnapping." Miss Whitmore came willingly. She chose freedom over slavery, love over hate. And for that choice, you're going to kill her. Silence. Judge Pemberton shouted, "I killed Edmund Whitmore. I killed Caroline Whitmore. I killed Overseer Daniels and Colonel Thompson and every other person who drank that poison. And you know what? I'm not sorry. Not even a little bit," gasps from the crowd. "Those people tortured me, whipped me, beat me within an inch of my life for the crime of loving another human being. They sold children. They raped women. They worked people to death and called it farming. They were evil. And if killing evil makes me a monster, then I'm a monster. But at least I'm an honest monster. You're monsters who pretend to be civilized. Remove him." Judge Pemberton ordered. Guards dragged Elijah from the courtroom, but he kept shouting, "You'll kill me, but you can't kill what I proved. We're human. We feel, we love, we fight, and one day we'll all be free. Remember me. Remember Elijah. Remember that one slave loved so deeply he destroyed you all." His voice echoed through the courthouse until they locked him in a cell below. Catherine's trial continued. She was asked to denounce Elijah, to claim bewitchment, to beg forgiveness. Instead, she said, "I love him. I've loved him from the moment I met him. He's a better man than any in this room." And when you hang us, know that we'll die together, and that's more than any of you will ever have." The judge didn't even deliberate. Guilty on all counts. Both defendants are sentenced to death. Elijah by burning at the stake, Catherine Whitmore by hanging. Executions to take place September 28th at noon in the public square. May God have mercy on your souls. They were kept in separate cells for the next 18 days. No contact, no final words. Elijah spent his time writing. A guard who pitied him brought paper and pencil. He wrote down everything. The story of his love for Catherine, the brutality of the Whitmore plantation, the poisoning, the escape, the deaths of Abigail and the others. His only regret that he hadn't killed more slaveholders. He gave the pages to the sympathetic guard. "Give these to an abolitionist newspaper. Let people know the truth." The guard nodded. The pages would eventually reach The Liberator, the abolitionist paper in Boston. Parts would be published, heavily edited, but Elijah's words would survive. Catherine spent her time in prayer, not to the white man's God who'd condoned slavery, but to whatever force governed the universe, asking only that she and Elijah could be together in death as they'd been denied in life. September 28th, 1851. Execution Day. The public square in Yazoo City was packed. 2,000 people had come to watch. The largest execution in Mississippi history. A wooden stake had been erected in the center of the square, wood piled around its base. 20 feet away, a gallows. At noon, they brought Elijah out first. Chained but walking with his head high, they stripped him to the waist, tied him to the stake. The crowd jeered, called him monster, animal, demon. Elijah ignored them. His eyes scanned the crowd, looking for one face. Then he saw her, Catherine, being led through the crowd toward the gallows. Their eyes met across the distance. "I love you," he mouthed. "I love you too," she mouthed back. Sheriff Johnson stepped forward. "Elijah, you Negro slave, you have been found guilty of the heinous murder of 9 white citizens. Before you are sent to hell where you belong, have you any last words?" Elijah looked at the crowd, looked at the plantation owners and their families, at the poor whites who'd come for entertainment, at the few slaves who'd been forced to watch as a warning. He spoke loud and clear. "My name is Elijah. I was born a slave. I lived as a slave, but I die a free man. Free because I chose love over fear. Free because I fought back against evil. Free because I'd rather burn than bow." He looked at Catherine. "I loved a woman who was supposed to be my enemy. She loved me back. That love was more real, more pure, more honest than anything you people have ever felt. And you're killing us for it." He addressed the slaves in the crowd directly. "Remember this. Remember that one of us fought back. One of us chose death over chains. You can too, all of you. Rise up, fight, die free rather than live in bondage. They can kill me, but they can't kill the idea that we're human, that we deserve liberty, that we will have it one way or another." Sheriff Johnson nodded to the executioner. "Enough, light it." A torch was brought to the wood at Elijah's feet. The flames caught, began to spread. "Wait!" Catherine screamed from the gallows. "Let me die first. Don't make me watch him burn." "Shut up," her executioner said, adjusting the noose around her neck. The flames grew higher. Smoke rose. The heat became unbearable. Elijah never screamed. He kept his eyes on Catherine, his face set in determination. Only when the smoke became too thick, when his lungs began to fail, did he finally close his eyes. His last thought was of her smile. He lost consciousness from smoke inhalation before the flames consumed him. A mercy, small but real. Catherine watched the flames take him, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with sobs. But even through her grief, she stood tall. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her broken. When Elijah's body finally slumped, consumed by fire and smoke, the executioner turned to Catherine. "Your turn." She was positioned on the trapdoor, noose around her neck. The crowd was silent now, uncertain. Watching a Negro burn was one thing. Watching a white woman hang, even a traitor, was different. Judge Pemberton stepped forward. "Catherine Whitmore, you have been found guilty of treason against your race and conspiracy in the murder of 9 souls. Have you any last words?" Catherine looked out at the crowd. At the faces full of hatred, fear, righteousness. At the few who looked uncomfortable, questioning. She spoke clearly, her voice carrying across the square. My name is Catherine. I was born into privilege, built on the backs of enslaved people. I benefited from their suffering for 19 years. And then I met Elijah, and he showed me what I'd been blind to my entire life, that slaves aren't property. They're people, human beings with hearts and minds and souls as valuable as mine. She looked at the smoking remains of the stake where Elijah had burned. I loved him, truly, deeply, completely. And that love opened my eyes to the evil of slavery, to the sickness at the heart of this society. You call me traitor, but I betrayed nothing worth keeping. I chose love over hate, freedom over chains, truth over lies. Her voice grew stronger. You're killing me today. But you can't kill what Elijah and I proved. That love transcends race, that humanity can't be destroyed by chains, that people will always choose freedom when given the chance. You can hang me, but you can't hang the truth. And the truth is that slavery is evil. You are evil. And one day, maybe not in my lifetime, but someday, this whole rotten system will burn to the ground, just like you burned the man I loved. She looked directly at the plantation owners in the front row. And when it does, when your slaves rise up and break their chains and take back their stolen lives, remember me. Remember Catherine Whitmore, who saw the truth and chose the right side, who died free even with a rope around her neck. She turned her eyes to the sky. Elijah, wait for me. I'm coming. Judge Pemberton's face was purple with rage. Hang her now. The executioner hesitated, just for a second. Then he pulled the lever. The trapdoor opened. Catherine dropped. Her neck broke instantly. Death was immediate, painless. Another small mercy. Her body swung gently in the afternoon breeze. The crowd began to disperse, uncomfortable, unsatisfied. They'd come for entertainment but left feeling something else. Doubt, maybe. Or shame. The bodies were left hanging and burning for 3 days as warning. On the 4th day, they were cut down and buried in unmarked graves on the edge of town, in unconsecrated ground. No headstones, no markers. Nothing to show that Elijah and Catherine had ever existed, but the story didn't die with them. Aftermath. The Whitmore plantation was never the same. Without the family to run it, it was sold off piecemeal. The remaining slaves were auctioned to other plantations. Families split apart, lives scattered. Within 10 years, the big house had fallen into disrepair. By 1870, it was abandoned completely, left to rot. Local legend said the place was haunted. People claimed to see figures in the garden at twilight, a man and woman, walking hand in hand among the roses that had grown wild. Some said you could hear singing, old spirituals that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. No one would buy the property. It sat empty for decades, a monument to the family that had lived and died there. The story of Elijah and Catherine spread like wildfire through the slave communities of the South. Details were embellished, changed, adapted, but the core remained. A slave and a white woman had loved each other, had poisoned their oppressors, had run for freedom, had died together rather than live apart. It became a symbol. A spiritual song was written about them, sung in secret gatherings. Elijah loved a lady fair. She loved him back without a care. They poisoned Massa, broke the chains and ran together through the rains, wade in the water. Children wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. The song spread from Mississippi to Alabama, Georgia, the Carolinas. It was sung at secret meetings of the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman was said to have sung it during her rescues. In the North, abolitionist newspapers seized on the story. The Liberator published excerpts from Elijah's writings in late 1851. William Lloyd Garrison wrote an editorial titled The Martyr Lovers of Mississippi that became one of the most widely reprinted abolitionist pieces of the era. Frederick Douglass spoke about them in a speech in 1853. Elijah and Catherine proved what the slaveholders fear most, that love knows no color, that humanity cannot be chained, and that people will die for freedom. Their deaths were tragic, but their lives were testimony to the truth. Slavery cannot stand. It must fall, and it will fall. And when it does, we will remember those who died fighting for that day. Theodore Parker, the Unitarian minister, wrote, "They called it murder, but it was justice. They called it insurrection, but it was self-defense. They called her a traitor, but she was the only loyal one, loyal to humanity, to love, to truth." The story reached unexpected places. In 1855, a play was written about them, The Forbidden Love of Whitmore Plantation. It was immediately banned in the South, but performed in Boston, New York, and Philadelphia to sold-out crowds. The play was melodramatic, romanticized, but it moved people, made them think, made them question. A novel followed in 1858, Catherine and Elijah, A Tale of Love and Liberty. It became a bestseller in the North, was passed secretly among literate slaves in the South. The story became legend, and legends have power. In Mississippi, the reaction was different. Plantation owners became paranoid. They tasted their food before eating. They questioned their most trusted slaves. They increased punishments, hoping to terrorize people into submission, but it had the opposite effect. Between 1851 and 1860, there were 12 documented cases of mass poisoning attempts in Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. Some successful, some not. Authorities tried to suppress the reports, but word spread anyway. The idea that Elijah had planted, that slaves could fight back, could kill their oppressors, took root. More slaves ran, more attempted rebellion. The system was cracking, and when John Brown raided Harper's Ferry in 1859, among the papers found in his possession was a copy of Elijah's writing, annotated with notes. "This is what we fight for. This is why slavery must end." The Civil War came in 1861. The Confederacy fought to preserve slavery. They lost. The Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, the 13th Amendment in 1865. Slavery ended, at least legally. Former slaves named their children Elijah and Catherine in honor of the story. The names spread across the South, a secret tribute to the martyrs. In the decades after the war, during Reconstruction, a group of formerly enslaved people from Yazoo County returned to the abandoned Whitmore plantation. They found the unmarked graves where Elijah and Catherine had been buried. They erected a simple wooden cross, carved with words, "Here lie Elijah and Catherine, who loved when love was forbidden, who fought when fighting was death, who died free, never forgotten." The cross was torn down by white supremacists within a week, but it was rebuilt. Torn down again, rebuilt again. This pattern continued for years, a battle over memory itself. In 1895, Ada B. Wells, the journalist and civil rights activist, wrote an article about Elijah and Catherine for a black newspaper. She framed their story not as a romance, but as a revolution. They didn't just love across the color line, they shattered it. They didn't just escape, they destroyed. They showed that resistance is possible, that the oppressed can fight back, that love is stronger than hate. By the turn of the 20th century, the story had faded somewhat from public consciousness. Other stories, other martyrs, other battles. But it never disappeared completely. During the Jim Crow era, when the South re-enslaved black people through other means, sharecropping, convict leasing, segregation, the story was whispered again, a reminder that resistance was always possible. In the 1960s, during the Civil Rights Movement, historians rediscovered Elijah and Catherine. A researcher found the original wanted posters, court transcripts, newspaper accounts. A more accurate history emerged. In 1968, a historical marker was finally erected near the site of the Whitmore plantation, now just overgrown fields, site of the Whitmore plantation incident. 1851, a reminder of slavery's cruelty and the human cost of forbidden love. 9 died in poison. 7 more in flight, Elijah and Catherine, executed for love. We die free. Their last words, never again, in 2018. A small memorial park was created on the site. Two statues, one of Elijah, one of Catherine, standing side by side, hands almost but not quite touching. The way they had lived, together but kept apart by forces beyond their control. The dedication plaque reads, "In memory of all those who loved across barriers, who fought against oppression, who chose freedom over safety, truth over comfort. May their sacrifice never be forgotten." Historical impact, the truth about resistance. The story of Elijah and Catherine represents a historical truth that American textbooks have often ignored. Enslaved people were not passive victims. They resisted constantly in ways large and small. Poisoning was a common form of resistance. Historians have documented hundreds of cases, some successful, most not. Enslaved cooks, house servants, and others, with access to food, used their knowledge of herbs and poisons to fight back. Many died for trying, some succeeded. The Whitmore massacre, as it was called in contemporary accounts, was one of the largest documented mass poisonings during American slavery. 9 confirmed dead in a single event was unprecedented. The story terrified slave owners across the South because it proved that even the most trusted slaves, those who seemed content, who worked in the house, who had been with a family for years, could turn deadly. It shattered the myth of the happy slave. The love story. Crossing the color line, relationships between enslaved people and white women were extremely rare and extremely dangerous. Most interracial sexual contact during slavery was rape, white men sexually assaulting enslaved women with impunity. But consensual relationships, while rare, did exist. They were the ultimate transgression in the slave South, threatening the entire racial hierarchy. If a white woman could love a black man as an equal, it undermined every justification for slavery. That's why the punishment was always death. Not just execution, public torture, burning alive for men, sometimes hanging for women who participated. The cruelty was the point. Terror was the tool, but love survived anyway. In secret corners, in whispered conversations, in stolen moments, people found connection across the artificial lines society had drawn. Elijah and Catherine's story represents all of those hidden loves, all of those impossible connections, all of those people who dared to see each other as human, despite living in a system designed to prevent exactly that. The question of justice, murder or liberation. The most difficult question the story raises: was Elijah a murderer or a freedom fighter? He killed 9 people. He planned it meticulously. He showed no remorse. He poisoned people during a wedding feast, a moment of supposed celebration and joy. And yet, those 9 people had enslaved, tortured, and killed countless others. They had built their wealth on stolen labor and broken bodies. They had separated families, raped women, murdered children. They had whipped Elijah nearly to death for the crime of loving someone. When the legal system offers no justice, when the courts are run by oppressors, when every path to freedom is blocked, what options remain? Elijah's answer: violence. Brutal, unapologetic violence. Modern ethicists still debate his choice. Was it justified? Was it necessary? Could he have escaped without killing anyone? Perhaps, but he didn't just want to escape. He wanted revenge. Wanted his oppressors to feel fear, to know they weren't invincible, to die the way they'd made so many others die, in pain and terror. That's not comfortable. That's not the sanitized version of history we like to tell. But it's honest, and honesty matters. The legacy, what we carry forward today. 173 years after Elijah and Catherine died, their story still resonates. We live in a world still grappling with racism, with systemic oppression, with the legacies of slavery, mass incarceration, police brutality, economic inequality, segregation by other names. The fight Elijah and Catherine died for isn't finished, but their story reminds us of several truths. 1. Love is revolutionary. When you love someone, society says you shouldn't. When you see humanity where you're told to see property, when you choose connection over division, that's radical. That's dangerous to oppressive systems. That's powerful. Resistance is always possible. Even in the most oppressive circumstances, people can fight back. Sometimes they win. Sometimes they die trying. But the attempt matters. The defiance matters. It plants seeds. Freedom is worth dying for. Elijah and Catherine both chose death over continued oppression. That choice, the willingness to die free rather than live in chains, is the ultimate act of human dignity. History remembers. The slaveholders wanted to erase Elijah and Catherine. Unmarked graves, no monuments, suppressed stories. But 173 years later, we're still talking about them. Their names survived. Their love survived. The oppressors' names are footnotes in history, but Elijah and Catherine are legends. Change is slow but certain. Elijah died 10 years before the Civil War, 14 years before emancipation. He didn't live to see slavery end, but his resistance, and the resistance of thousands like him, helped make that end inevitable. He was one brick in a wall that would eventually crumble. Final reflection. If this story disturbed you, moved you, angered you, or broke your heart, good. It should. This is American history, not the sanitized version, the real version. The bloody, brutal, honest version. Elijah was a real person. Catherine was a real person. Their names are changed. Some details are dramatized. But people like them existed, loved, fought, died. They deserve to be remembered. Every person who was enslaved deserves to be remembered. Every person who resisted deserves to be remembered. Every person who chose love over hate, freedom over safety, truth over comfort. They deserve to be remembered, so remember them, tell their stories, honor their sacrifices, and finish the work they started, because we're not free yet. Not truly. Not while racism persists. Not while inequality persists. Not while oppression persists. But we're closer than we were, and we're closer because people like Elijah and Catherine refused to accept the world as it was. They imagined something better. They fought for something better. They died for something better. We owe them our continued fight. This is the story of Elijah and Catherine. Field hand and planter's daughter. Slave and free. Lovers and revolutionaries. Murderers and martyrs. They lived. They loved. They killed. They died. Never forgotten. If this story moved you, if it challenged you, if it made you think about American history in new ways, share it. Leave your thoughts in the comments. And remember, knowing our history, all of it, even the parts that make us uncomfortable, is essential to building a better future. Their names were Elijah and Catherine. Say their names. Remember their story. Honor their sacrifice.